Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer and today I'm going to tell you this story about how Ayn Rand's philosophy impacted my view on the environmentalist movement. And before you jump to conclusions, no, Ayn Rand's philosophy did not make me hate the environment. That is not the story I'm going to tell. Alright, so it all started when I was a child and a teenager. You know, back in the day, I really used to think that environmentalism was the way. I had that environmentalist ideology because, you know, that's what I learned from the culture and people around me. And even though I didn't engage in the common practices that extreme environmentalists engage in, like recycling and trying to be zero waste or whatever, ideologically, I still think that environmentalism was the way. But even though I didn't engage in those type of activities such as recycling, every now and then I would have my Greta Thunberg moments and I would be like, oh my gosh, the world is burning, the monkeys are dying, how do we stop this? You know, I had little panic episodes every now and then. So naturally, like many environmentalists, I felt guilty about doing normal things like driving a car, using a plastic bag, drinking from a straw, taking long showers, etc. And then something interesting happened. Basically, when I was doing an internship at the Ayn Rand Institute, the professors or instructors there gave us an assignment that we had to pick a subject from a list of subjects that they had and do a presentation on the subject. Say what we thought about it versus what Ayn Rand thought about it, basically. So I look at the list and one of the topics on the list was environmentalism, and I was like, ooh, I'm gonna pick this and I'm gonna show them that they're wrong, that environmentalism is good, and yeah, I'm gonna teach them a lesson. So I went to work and I started reading some articles that Ayn Rand had wrote on the subject and some other articles that some other writers from the Ayn Rand Institute had published. And after reading all those articles, I was like, what? I was kind of shocked because I was suddenly presented with a view about environmentalism that I had never thought about. Basically, for me, environmentalism was all about saving the animals, saving the environment, but I had never really factored human survival into the equation. And so the more I read, the more I realized that the whole narrative about environmentalism changes dramatically when you put human well-being at the forefront of the debate. So here's what I came to realize and what I agree with now. The reason the objectivist perspective doesn't really support environmentalism is because Ayn Rand considered human well-being and human survival to be more important than keeping the earth intact. And just because I think it is okay for us humans to use nature to our advantage doesn't mean that I think it's okay for people to go to the Arctic and start killing baby seals for fun, you know? That's not what I'm advocating. And the truth is that in order to survive, we have to alter nature one way or the other. Sometimes you only need to alter it a little bit, use it a little bit, you know, like cultivating herbs and using those herbs for our sustenance. And sometimes we need to alter nature a lot, like by building dams to ensure millions of people have access to water. Altering nature for the benefit of human beings has always been the norm, ever since primitive man discovered fire. I mean, I'm pretty sure primitive man would do anything in their power to get access to some air conditioning if they could. But just because we don't put the environment first, that doesn't mean we don't care about the environment at all, you know? And I know some people are gonna say, but no, nature shouldn't be changed. Nature is in perfect equilibrium. Well, that is not true. Nature doesn't care. And equilibrium, I mean, humans and animals have suffered from nature's equilibrium for hundreds of years. You know, we've suffered through heat waves, ice ages, pests, disease, hurricanes, volcanoes, and a bunch of other things that have wiped out animals and human beings way before humans started using energy and developing technologies. If we really let nature run its course, we would be dead in no time. It is human ingenuity that helps us develop technologies that protect us when those attacks from nature happen. Now, I'm going to read you a quote by Ayn Rand that summarizes this sentiment very well. It says, Without machines and technology, the task of mere survival is a terrible, mind and body wrecking ordeal. In nature, the struggle for food, clothing, and shelter consumes all of man's energy and spirit. It's a losing struggle. The winner is any flood, earthquake, or swarm of locusts. To work only for bare necessities is a luxury that man cannot afford. And what about the real negatives of human impact on the environment? The type of impact that not only hurts the animals in the environment, but it also hurts us, like an oil spill. Well, here's what Ayn Rand had to say on the subject. It says, "City smoke and filthy rivers are not good for man, though they are not the kind of danger that the ecological panic mongers proclaim them to be. This is a scientific, technological problem, not a political one, and it can be solved only by technology. Even if smoke were a risk to human life, we must remember that life in nature without technology is wholesale dead. Even if smoke were a risk to human life, we must remember that life in nature without technology is wholesale dead." I think this line is very important because we must admit that yes, humans using the environment is sometimes going to have a negative impact, but we must remember that the positives that we get from using the environment far outweigh the negatives that come with altering nature. For instance, yes, cars generate smoke, and smoke triggers some respiratory diseases in some people, but that doesn't mean we should stop using cars because there are more benefits than negatives to using cars. Cars protect us from the elements during our commute. They save time and they can do great things like get us faster to the hospital in an emergency. But what about all that scary data that is released every year about human impact on the environment? You know, like every year you'll see charts of like, oh, this year humans generated 1 million tons of city smoke. Oh my God. Well, of course it's going to sound bad if that's all you're mentioning, but if they also focus on the immense value that is gained by people all over the world by the use of dirty energy, I mean, those numbers would be much bigger than the numbers of tons of smoke produced in the world. The number of lives positively impacted by the use of dirty energy would be much bigger. But to be honest, I don't have the skills or the necessary knowledge to analyze data when I read it. So when it comes to science, you know, I just don't have time to look at all these charts and blah, blah, blah. So I have to base my opinions on principles. And the principle I go by is that human comfort and human survival are top priority. Therefore, using nature for that purpose is okay. And not only is okay, it's necessary and should be encouraged. But does that mean that we should just go ahead and destroy everything in our path just because it might benefit human beings? No, I don't think that's the case, because we must recognize that we're not the only living beings in the planet. Therefore, we should try to be considerate when using the environment. You know, for example, lumber companies, right? They need to chop down trees to make lumber or whatever. I mean, they should know that there are animals living in the forest, therefore they should probably take some extra time to try to evacuate the areas that are going to chop before starting to chop. I don't actually know if they're doing this or not, but that would be, you know, an example of how we could still use the environment but also be considerate to the other living beings around us. And another argument in favor of using the environment is life expectancy. For instance, I don't know, 100 years ago, life expectancy was much lower than we have now, even though now we have more smoke. And the reason our life expectancy is much higher now is because we have developed a lot of technologies that help us lengthen our life, like vaccines, shelter, entertainment, foods with preservatives, all of those things that helped us make our life longer. Well, those things could not exist without the one thing that environmentalists love to hate on, which is fossil fuels or dirty energy. Because literally everything we have around us is made thanks to fossil fuels. You know, ventilators for people who are suffering from COVID. Those ventilators could only be produced with the use of dirty energy. And even things like processed vegan food is made by the use of energy. Like, we literally could not have all the comforts and the life-saving technologies that we have now if it wasn't for energy and fossil fuels. And here's one more very interesting thing. I used to panic when I used to think about nature and its resources, and I used to think like, oh my gosh, those resources, they're limited, we're gonna run out, like, stop using them. But I've come to realize that that is not true in most cases. I've actually learned that as long as people can profit from something, they have a higher incentive to keep it around. For instance, paper. As long as companies can profit from the production of paper, they have a higher incentive to keep planting trees, right? Because they need trees to make paper. Same with water, right? As long as companies that produce bottled water can profit from selling bottled water, they're gonna have an incentive to, you know, fund technologies that clean water or fund technologies that preserve water, you know? So profiting from nature is actually a positive, which I never thought could be the case in the past. So in conclusion, I think environmentalism is bad because it's trying to shame people from doing the normal things they have to do to ensure their survival. And it's trying to make them feel guilty for living, you know, guilty for having children, guilty for buying clothes, guilty from using a car, you know. Those are just normal things that people need to do to live. But that doesn't mean I don't empathize with the environmentalists, because I know that for them, that fear that the earth is going to end is very real. I even made a movie about this called Earth Freaks, where the main characters are empathetic environmentalists. But just because I'm not an environmentalist, that doesn't mean that I have stopped caring for the planet or that I'm going around littering at any chance I get. No. And sure, I think you should be able to shop from sustainable sources if you have the financial means, but don't try to force your lifestyle on people who cannot afford it, you know? And overall, I'm happy that I have stopped feeling that sense of panic that comes with being an environmentalist. I no longer think the earth is going to end anytime soon. I have a much more realistic view of the issue now. I just think we're using nature to the best of our ability to further our survival and further human progress. And yes, there is some collateral damage in the process, but the only thing we're gonna get better is if we keep working, developing better technologies so that that collateral damage decreases, you know, as our technologies improve. And I do have faith that people are going to figure it out. They're gonna figure it out how to make our technologies less damaging and pollute less, you know? Anyways, that was it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to have another video next week, so stay tuned and thank you for watching.